Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We will be presenting case analysis in the area of medical negligence. Okay, we will start with mine first. My name is Nushrada binti Muhammad Sabri. The first case is Kuala Terengganu Specialist Hospital, Sendiran Berhad and Ano against Ahmad Takif Amza bin Ahmad Huzairi. We'll start with the facts of the case. This case is about Ahmad Takif Amza, a young child who experienced severe brain damage because of delays in medical treatment. Initially, he was taken to Kuala Terengganu Specialist Hospital, but the seriousness of his condition wasn't clearly explained to his parents. Okay, later at the government hospital, there were further delays in securing his airway and conducting a CT scan, which resulted in irreversible harm. Both parties were not satisfied with the High Court's ruling, so they appealed to the Court of Appeal. There's four legal issues in this case. One, did the healthcare providers breach their duty of care? Second, did they fulfill their duty of care properly? Third, can the hospital and government be held vicariously liable? Fourth, did the parents' delay in seeking treatment reduce the defendant's liability? For law, first, breach of duty of care by hospital, doctors, and healthcare personnel. In this case, it fulfilled all the elements of negligence. For this one, breach of duty, delays in treatment such as securing the airway or conducting a CT scan constitute a breach. Okay, second one, existence and discharge of duty of care derived from Donahue against Vincent, requiring professional to act reasonably. Okay, the third one, vicarious liability. Employers like hospitals are liable for employees negligent under the Government Proceedings Act 1956. The fourth one, contributory negligence. Under Section 12 of the Civil Law Act 1956, damages are reduced if the penalty partly caused the harm. This is the argument from both sides. To simplify, the plaintiff argued that the hospital didn't act urgently or fulfill their responsibility. On the other hand, the defendant said they handled the situation reasonably and partly blamed the parents for the delay. For the court decision, the Court of Appeal mostly agreed with the High Court's finding. They decided the private hospital was 15% at fault and the government hospital 55% at fault for the delays and poor care. The parents were held 30% responsible because they delayed seeking treatment even after being told it was urgent. As a result, their compensation was reduced by 30%. Aggravated damages weren't awarded since there was no evidence of intentional wrongdoings by the hospital. For ratio decidendi, the court ruled on these four key points. First, the defendant breached their duty by delaying crucial action leading to the injury. Second, the doctor-patient relationship established the duty of care, which both hospitals failed to uphold. Third, the hospitals were vicariously liable for their staff negligence. Fourth, the parents' delay in seeking urgent care contributed 30% to the harm, reducing the awarded damages. In my opinion, the decision was generally fair. The government hospital was more at fault because they caused significant delays in care, but the private hospitals' 15% responsibility feels low, as they should have emphasized the urgency more. Blaming the parents 30% makes sense, but it doesn't fully take account into the financial struggles or the lack of knowledge about free healthcare options. A smaller percentage of blame on them would have been more impactful. Overall, the court tried to divide responsibility fairly, but they could have considered the parents' situation more. In the future, hospitals should work on improving how they communicate in emergency and act more quickly. Furthermore, public awareness campaign about healthcare rights will also help reduce delays caused by financial worries, leading to better outcome in similar cases.
The issue in the case of Datin Dr. Teo Sulin against Gopal Subramaniam are whether Dr. Teo failed to provide proper care by misdiagnosing the condition and prescribing prolonged steroid use without monitoring eye pressure. Next is whether plaintiff injuries are foreseeable result of Dr. Teo's action, and whether the plaintiff expert witness qualified to testify on medical negligence. Lastly is whether the settlement with other defendants absolved Dr. Teo of liability. The court applied two main legal principles. Firstly is the duty of care, where a doctor is not negligent if they act according to the standard accepted by responsible medical professional. The court also decides if a patient was adequately informed about risks. Next is causation and falsibility, where the but-for test was used to determine the causation. Dr. Teo failure to diagnose and prolong steroid use directly caused the patient vision loss, which was deemed foreseeable. So the fact of the case is a 14-year-old boy injured his eye during a tennis match. Dr. Teo treated him with steroid for months, but this led to glaucoma and severe eye damage. Other specialists later diagnosed a detached retina and performed surgeries, but he still lost much of his vision. The family sued Dr. Teo for misdiagnosis and improper treatment. Other parties settled, leaving Dr. Teo as the only one on trial. In conclusion, the Court of Appeal found Dr. Teo guilty of medical negligence. In conclusion, the Court of Appeal found Dr. Teo guilty of medical negligence for misdiagnosis and improper treatment, which caused glaucoma and vision loss. The court reduced general damages to 100,000 ringgit, dismissed future damage claim, but upheld special damage with evidence.
Next, the case of Sujilawati binti Ali and another versus Dr. Alif Al-Ain bin Muhammad Fatila and another 2023. There are 5 issues identified in this case. First, whether the defendants were negligent towards the deceased and the plaintiffs. Second, whether the defendants have breach of duty of care towards the deceased, whether Hospital Sangkap Melintang and the government of Malaysia could be held vicariously liable, whether the plaintiffs could be held liable under the principle of contributory negligence, and last, whether the plaintiffs can claim damages regarding to medical negligence toward their son. The principle of law, first duty of care. The neighbour principle is used, refer to the case of Donahue versus Stevenson. In this case, there was a doctor-patient relationship between the defendants and the deceased, means that the defendants owe a duty of care toward the deceased. Second, breach of duty of care. The Bolam test is applicable in this case and also refer to the case of Bolito. The third one, causation, is cause of action by the defendant and the plaintiffs that contributed to the death of the deceased. For damages, the court awarded a sum of money for special damages, general damages, and aggravated damages. For vicarious liability, Section 5 of the Government Proceeding Act 1956 sets out the liability of the government tort and also refer to the case of Piu Piuma versus Dr. Lim So Hao and others. For contributory negligence, there were 5 elements must be fulfilled to prove the contributory negligence and also refer to Section 12, Subsection 1, Civil Law Act 1956. For court decisions, the court held that the first defendant was not liable from the liability for negligence. The court decided that the third to fifth defendants has breached duty of care. The government of Malaysia and HSM were held vicariously liable for the negligence, and the plaintiffs found to be contributory negligent on the deceased death. The court allowed the plaintiff's special damages claim, and the court awarded RM 150,000 for pain and suffering and loss of amenities and additional RM 100,000 as aggravated damages.
Okay, moving on to the next case, which is in the case of Yusnita binti Johari against Dr. Jerily Mariam Kong and others, 2023. So in this case, it is already have been discussed that there is a 4 issue, which is can be summarized as the defendants were accused of failing to provide adequate medical care resulting in the plaintiff's severe brain damage due to oxygen deprivation during and after an emergency cesarean section. So, the court found that the hospital was vicariously liable for its staff actions, citing systematic failures in care that contributed to the plaintiff's irreversible injuries. For the law of the case, there are 4 laws that has been stated, which is breach of duty, causation, vicarious liability, and damages. And then, the court found that the defendants failed to meet the expected standard of care during an emergency cesarean section, leading to the plaintiff's severe brain damage from oxygen deprivation. The judgment emphasizes the importance of timely medical intervention and monitoring, holding the hospital vicariously liable for systematic failures. Moving on to the facts of the case, as the plaintiff Yusnita Johari suffered severe brain damage due to alleged medical negligence during and after an emergency cesarean section. She claimed the damages against the doctor and hospital management for failing to provide adequate care, which resulted in oxygen deprivation in significant injuries. Argument from both sides. So, from the plaintiff's perspective, the plaintiff claimed that the medical team failed to properly monitor her condition after her cesarean section, directly leading to severe brain damage from oxygen deprivation and highlighting systematic failures within the healthcare system. She sought substantial damages for incurred expenses, future medical needs, pain and suffering, and requests legal fees to cover the costs associated with her complex negligence claim. And then, from the defendant's perspective, the defendants argue that they adhere to accepted medical standards in treating the plaintiff and claim there was no direct link between their actions and her injuries, suggesting that other factors may have contributed. Moving on to the ratio decidendi of the case. So, in this case, the court established that medical practitioners have a duty of care to monitor and respond to their patients' conditions promptly, finding that the defendant's failure to act led to severe brain damage for the plaintiff. Additionally, the court held the government liable for systematic failures in healthcare delivery, affirming its not delegible duty of care and awarding damages based on the proven negligence and significant impact on the plaintiff's quality of life. For the court decision, Malaysian High Court found that the defendants liable for medical negligence resulting in severe brain damage to the plaintiff due to inadequate monitoring after the cesarean section. The court awarded substantial damages totaling approximately RM4 million, recognizing the impact of the negligence on the plaintiff's quality of life and holding the government accountable for systematic failures in healthcare delivery. To conclude, in the case of the Yusnita binti Johari against Dr. Jerry Mariam Kong and others, the Malaysian High Court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, finding that the defendant liable for medical negligence and then resulted in severe brain damage due to inadequate monitoring after a cesarean section. So, the court awarded approximately RM4 million in damages for various losses, underscoring the critical need for proper medical care and actionability within healthcare systems. Last but not least, from my point of view, I could say that the court found the defendants liable for medical negligence, which caused severe brain damage to the plaintiff due to inadequate monitoring after her cesarean section, resulting in oxygen deprivation. So, the plaintiff was awarded approximately RM4 million in damages along the legal costs, highlighting the importance of proper patient monitoring and accountability in healthcare.
Assalamualaikum and good evening. My name is Muhammad Firuz bin Muhammad Azari. So my case is Xiao Qingyi against Columbia Asia. So the issue here is whether defendant, which is Columbia Asia, provide all duty of care to the patient. Second is whether the defendant's treatment provided fell below the standard of the care expected of a reasonable hospital. And the third one is actually whether the hospital is vicariously liable for the negligence or the staff. And then lastly, whether the plaintiff injuries and subsequent disability caused by breach of duty of his staff. In this case, we can determine that duty of care is one of the law of this case, which is fulfill 5 elements. And then the second law is vicarious liability. Vicarious liability is responsibilities occurs when one person is held liable for the wrongdoing of another because of the relationship. The law for this case is actually negligence causation. Causation is important in negligence claim because it proves the relationship between the defendant's breach of duty and plaintiff injury. Last law for this case is actually breach of duty. Breach of duty in this case resulted from the consultant anesthetist's inability to immediately protect patient airways during the medical emergency. Content of this case is plaintiff argument stated that non-deligible duty of care. The second one is statutory obligation, and the third one is application of Woodland test. The plaintiff invoked the principle of this case, Woodland, against Swimming Teacher Association and others, which specifically criteria to establish a non-deligible duty of care. So for the defendant part, which is defendant's argument, there is independent contractor defense. Columbia Asia contended that Mr. Xiao treatment were independent contractors, not an employee of the hospital. And the second one is provision of facilities only. The hospital maintained for its role for limiting the offering of the premises and necessary facilities for medical practitioners to operate. Lastly, the sufficiency of professional indemnity. Columbia Asia suggested that the responsibility for animal practice should solely with the individual doctors, not the professional indemnity insurance to cover in such incidents. The court decision is the federal court ruled in favor of the plaintiff by majority vote. It is established that private hospitals have non-deligible duty of care to their patient, rendering them accountable for the negligence of the medical practitioner working in the facilities, regardless of whether they are independent contractors. This decision is a watershed moment in Malaysian medical negligence law, highlighting the direct liability of private hospitals for patient care.